fast forward to 2020 and COVID hits, that's same sort of crisis, different crisis, obviously, but again, kind of a major stress on the firm. Brand new building of our design right on the cultural trail, right as it's kind of getting recognition. And so that, I think, showed a lot of folks.
Did you guys know about the Indiana Cultural Trail at the time, and did it affect your design thought process at all?
I got great early experiences and was able to spend time on job sites and see the different trades and the work involved to build a building.
What single piece of advice would you give other small firm leaders about creating a firm culture that attracts and retains passionate design talent? Welcome to this episode of the On Center podcast. Today we have Scott Perkins. If you're familiar with the Indianapolis architecture scene, you've almost certainly heard the name Scott Perkins. Scott is the principal architect at Blackline Studio, which is an Indianapolis-based firm renowned for its community-driven ethos, adaptive reuse projects, and deep civic engagement across the city. Over decades of practice, Scott has become a pillar of Indiana's architecture community, admired for his leadership, mentorship of young architects, and unwavering commitment to designs that uplift local neighborhoods. In our conversation, we'll explore the forces behind urban revitalization, how a firm culture can fuel creativity and responsibility, the ripple effects of mentorship and civic impact, and Scott's hard-won advice for emerging architects carving their path. As we delve into these insights, we're proud to have Map Solutions, your ongoing partner for laser scanning, sponsoring this episode and helping us bring these insider stories to life. Thanks for coming on, Scott.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
Super happy to have you here. Recently had a podcast guest, not on air, not on the recording, but tell me that you were the wisest person in architecture in Indy today. So I just want to go ahead and pass that along. Your 30 years in architecture have often centered on breathing new life into old structures and communities. Blackline's leadership has even earned accolades for historic preservation and adaptive reuse that spurred neighborhood revitalization. From converting neglected buildings into vibrant spaces to sparking rebirth in urban districts, you've consistently championed community-focused design in Indianapolis. Could you talk about that and talk about what draws you to adaptive reuse and urban revitalization projects?
Sure. So as a student, I was a suburban kid, right?
Sure.
And so once I became an architecture student, I started looking at the world, looking at my world differently, and started to explore, even in Muncie, where I went to Ball State, what's a city, and what exploring alleys and seeing the texture and the patina and sometimes the deterioration of historic structures. And for whatever reason, historic structures they've always struck a chord with me. I don't have necessarily the educational background. There's master's programs in historic preservation that I don't have. But for me, it's a commitment to recognizing that historic buildings are a resource to be a good steward of those resources. And then in practice, one of the cool things is the before and after. The seeing a historic building that you've worked on, that was run down, falling down in some cases, seeing that get a new use and a new life, and given decades more life than it would have had. So for example, we had a project recently in a small town near Indy. The owner bought these two adjacent buildings that were literally roof and portions of the floor had caved in. That owner had a vision, purchased the properties from the town at a very low cost. We were able to work with him to restructure the buildings, and now there's two great apartment units over two new commercial spaces in this small town. In Thorntown is where the project is. That's two new places to live. That's two new businesses on their Main Street storefront. That's restored buildings that give them a new future.
Sure.
Yeah.
And somebody else who maybe thought about putting a store there or maybe living there probably wouldn't have gone to that much trouble.
Yeah, exactly. The previous owner of these buildings was, they were falling down. It was one where there was actually holes in the roof such that they had kiddie pools catching the water that was running into the building.
Gotcha. How would you say seeing once blighted buildings like that completely transformed by design, not just in the way they look, but in the way that they're used and appreciated, how has that shaped your philosophy?
Um, well, yeah, I think the philosophy is for me is that you know d- it's almost never too late to save a historic building or save a resource in that way. And so looking at in our world today, thinking about sustainability, well, the most sustainable building is the one that you don't have to build new,
Fair enough.
right? And so if you can save and rehabilitate or renovate a historic structure, that's inherently more sustainable than building new.
Sure. In 2000, you co-founded Perkins Von Dalen and Associates with Craig Von Dalen, focusing initially on residential design. A decade later, with Craig McCormick joining the team in 2011, you rebranded as Blackline Studio. At the time, a pretty tight knit firm of three staff.
Mhm.
Fast forward to today, you guys have grown into a 9-person studio recognized as AIA Indiana's 2023 Distinguished Firm of the Year. I'm sure it's been a journey from a small 2-person office to an award winning practice. What was that evolution like for you? And could you share how the firm's focus and identity shifted throughout the rebrand and growth period?
Sure. So when we started the firm, it was myself and Craig Von Dalen, who was a classmate at Ball State. I knew him. I had recently moved back to Indy. Craig had a business that was building homes. He was designing those as an architect and then building them. Had built a construction company. So Craig needed help in designing the houses that they were going to build. I had aspirations for starting a firm. We reconnected after I moved back up here in '98, and that was the origin of the firm. So we did for really the first 6 or 7 years of our firm, we focused on single family. That was what Craig was building. Those were the kind of opportunities that we were getting, and so forth. And um, then the kind of financial crisis of 2007, 2008 hit us early because because all that single family just kind of stopped. Folks
Yeah.
just kind of hit the brakes on everything. And so, we were, I think, about 6 people at that time. We lost a few people through that just because we didn't have work to keep them on board. And so we kind of, plodded through that financial crisis. Part of that was, okay, looking at, okay, how can we adapt? And one of the ways that we adapted was, well, recognizing that in Indiana, it can be pretty challenging to build a firm doing single family work. There's some great firms doing great single family residential architecture, but in terms of building a firm that aspires to grow a little bit more, that can be challenging. And so what we recognized is we gotta move on to some bigger project types. We gotta be more open to commercial projects and so forth. And that kind of corresponded with Craig's shift from being a single family builder to more of a multifamily developer. And so we had um, that shift that was happening in terms of the kind of work that we were doing. And then we talked and, what else could we do that would kind of raise our profile or set the firm in a different direction. And so, we said, okay, having a more consistent focus on contemporary design would be a factor. And that's when Craig McCormick, we reconnected with him. We knew him from Ball State, and he was in a situation where he could join us in the firm. And that's collectively those things kind of came together 2010, 2011 timeframe, and we were able to start growing. Fast forward to 2020 and COVID hits, that's same sort of crisis, different crisis, obviously, but again, kind of a major stress on the firm. Thankfully, through the PPP loan program and some other, just we were able to actually grow through the crisis just by adding some staff that had been cut from other places, and thankfully we kind of bridged over that difficult time. So those in particular were, very challenging, kind of existential crisis, kind of challenging to the firm. And frankly, we feel fortunate to have been able to, I don't know how much was us navigating versus how much was luck, but we were
Sure.
able to weather both of those.
So it sounds like not only did you weather COVID, you came out better.
Yeah, it did, and thankfully, in Indiana, construction was seen as an essential activity, so
Sure.
jobs kept coming. The money was there to keep projects going, and so that just was able to keep things rolling. Whereas in other places, it was harder hit or slowed down.
I mean, both those were times that affected pretty much everybody
Mhm.
in the United States, including myself. It's nice to hear happy stories coming out of that for sure.
Yeah.
I don't have a happy story for the '08 recession, but COVID was a happy story for me too. So I can empathize with that.
Right. Yeah.
Blackline's projects don't just add to the skyline; they actively invest in neighborhoods. For instance, your early mixed-use project, The Hinge, became an award-winning catalyst in the Fountain Square area. In total, the firm has completed 17 projects that included around 665 new housing units and about 140 million in investment into Indianapolis communities. I hope those numbers are right. Beyond the numbers, Blackline also supports local nonprofits and encourages staff to engage in volunteer work. When you look at the impact of these projects and initiatives, how do you define success in the terms of community benefit? And can you share an example of a project where you consciously designed for social or neighborhood impact?
Mhm. So, yeah, again, we've been very fortunate in that, I mentioned my partner Craig. His development focus has been the southeast quadrant of the city. So Fountain Square, Fletcher Place neighborhoods that early on, from about 2010, as we were talking about, as we were kind of getting a new focus, we located our office in Fountain Square. He was focusing his development activities in the Fountain Square and Fletcher Place neighborhoods. So we were able to kind of essentially leapfrog around the neighborhood with the developments that he was taking on. And the Hinge, like you said, the Hinge was for us a kind of transformative project because it was his first big multifamily project as a developer. It was one of our first big mixed use projects as an architect. And, as luck would have it, the building's getting done right as the cultural trail is getting done.
Oh, cool.
So
Good
so the
timing.
so the Hinge and the cultural trail kind of the completion of those corresponded. And so we got a brand new building of our design right on the cultural trail, right as it's kind of getting recognition. And so that I think showed a lot of folks that, okay, who are these guys, where they come from? And, once folks find out we've been in business already 10 plus years, and we know kind of mixed use construction, we know residential construction. And so that enabled us to kind of move forward, in the development world a little bit. Specific to the southeast side, we're active with community development corporations. Send Southeast Neighborhood Development is a client of ours, and a project we just completed with them last year called the Bridgeman is to me is a good example kind of our commitment to kind of neighborhood based design. It was a 4-unit affordable housing project. It was on a lot that was open, but a lot of folks would have looked at that lot and said, no, you can't build anything on it. But Sin was able to acquire the lot. We were able to get zoning variances to allow us to kind of adjust the setbacks. We were able to get permitting done. We were able to get construction done. And so we delivered 4 affordable housing units at a below market price point for the construction, that Send, owns and manages to forward further, their mission. So
Gotcha.
that's probably the best single example that I can think of, small project, big impact kind of thing.
Very cool. You mentioned that you finished the Hinge at the same time the Indiana Cultural Trail was being finished.
Mm.
So I'm kind of curious, did you guys know about the Indiana Cultural Trail at the time, and did it affect your design thought process at all?
Yeah. So we were, the whole city kind of. I listened to part of Donna's interview with you on the way. So she was talking about the big impact that had on the city, and I think we all recognized uh, the impact that was going to have, and we saw, being in that neighborhood, we saw the construction day to day. I don't think we knew how much of a positive impact it was going to have on the city until then. But yeah, it was, the trail was happening right directly adjacent to our construction site. So we were
So cool.
working around the two at the same time.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
In 2023, Blackline Studio was honored with the AIA Indiana Distinguished Firm of the Year Award, which is a testament to the firm's design excellence and service. You personally were also recognized by Ball State with an Outstanding Alumni Award in 2024, highlighting your influence as a leader in architecture. Such honor suggests a legacy of not only good design, but also mentorship, advocacy, and community presence. How did it feel to see your firm and yourself earn these distinctions? And I'm sure, knowing you, you're going to give a really humble answer, but I still want to hear it. And what do you believe has been key to garnering the respect of your peers and community over the decades?
Um, the key is, um, I think my approach to the profession hopefully is a lot like my approach to parenting. It's showing up and being present. And that's not that you have to be there for everything. It's not that you have to be there all day, every day, but it's that you've got to be present at the key moments, right? And so a lot of folks think you got to be good at math to be an architect. No, you just need to have stamina. You just need to have perseverance and be willing to get up every day and recognize that, okay, this, today's going to be there might be difficulties today, but we're going to work through them and proceed through those. So I don't know that we've done anything that's particularly different or contrary to what other firms have done in the success that we've had. It's just consistent effort, trying to build good relationships, trying to follow through and do the right things.
Very cool. How do these recognitions inspire your ongoing work or your sense of responsibility to the local AAC community?
Yeah, what it shows me, again, 58 years old, I appreciate the recognition, but I don't feel like my work's done yet. I don't feel like we've done our best work yet, frankly. And so I want to continue on. I want to try and work towards other things. Um, other Yeah, again, I'm not driven by the awards. It's nice to be recognized, but that's not the motivation. It's trying to do good work. That's the ultimate desire.
Really cool. Outside of running your practice, you've remained actively involved in educating future architects, frequently returning to Ball State University, your alma mater, and even the University of Kentucky to serve as a visiting critic for student design reviews. Colleagues note that you're passionate about mentoring emerging professionals, evidenced by your engagement with academic studios and young architects in the firm. Why has mentorship and education been such a priority for you?
Um, my dad was an educator. My wife's an educator, so I think I come by a little bit of that aspiration, kind of honestly.
Nurture and nurture.
Yeah, a little bit of both. I enjoyed the academic setting, as a student, but I always appreciated practice too. I always kind of saw the balance of the two, and what I specifically enjoy. Going back to the schools, I love interacting with the kids. I love interacting with the professors. My approach when I'm doing that is trying to recognize good work, good student work, because I know how it affected me when, somebody, you're in a critique, and when one of the critics comes up to you and says, "Hey, I liked this or that about your project," that can have a big impact on a young person, on a young architect. And so I want to be able to kind of share that. I also want them to recognize sometimes students in an academic setting can be very heavy into that academic side. Well, sometimes there's a human side that they need to get reminded of. There are some fundamentals of, okay, where's the door? Is the bathroom in the right place? Those some of those kinds of things. And so my the again, I like to recognize the good work, but I like to challenge them in their thinking of, okay, how'd you get to this solution? And it wouldn't have been maybe a big jump to get to a different solution that worked better because of this or that. So it's something I really enjoy. I've got, some relationships with some professors at Ball State. A classmate of mine is head of the architecture department at UK, so that's why I get to go there, is because he texts me a couple times a year and says, "Hey, do you want to come down?" So I'd take any opportunity like that I can get.
So besides the human element of design that you just mentioned, is there anything in particular that you often try to instill in students when you critique them or try to guide them?
Yeah, it's just trying to both challenge them, but also give them the confidence. Right? It's kind of a balance of uh, n- knowing that they're on a path or they're on a journey, and you wanna help them along with that. And so sometimes they need the accolades. Sometimes they need the challenge, or the kick in the pants kind of thing. And so
Sure.
trying to be somebody there that can do either one of those.
Now, you're the teacher in these circumstances. You're the mentor, but how have these interactions with these students influenced your own perspective on architecture and practice?
Um, I'm generally optimistic. I mean, in general, me as a person, but I'm very optimistic when I look at student work now, frankly. Just the 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 level of thought, the pretty consistent amount of work that I see both at Ball State and UK when I'm there. That gives me confidence that that the future of the profession, if you will, is in good hands.
That's cool. That's very cool. Beyond your project work, you've worn the hat of a civic leader. For example, serving as chair of the design review committee for the town of Danville's overlay district. You even invested in leadership development, leadership Hendricks County class of 2006, to better serve your community. It's clear you believe architects should have a voice in civic affairs, from guiding local design standards to advocating for thoughtful housing and development policies. Can you discuss what drives you to engage in civic leadership and policy advocacy? And how has participating in these committees or boards shaped your approach to architecture?
Um, I think n- number one, that's some place where I feel like I can make a positive influence. Make a positive impact. So the committee that I'm on for the town of Danville, I live in Danville. I love the community. It's something that I can do that's helpful. It's part of the zoning ordinance that the town has. So that's something that I can do, that's consistent, that leverages my um, background, my skill set towards making the community better. So I see that as just a small way to give back. Other ways, by being kind of focused on housing. Our firm's work has been predominantly about housing over our full time in business. So that over the last few years, that's been a bigger focus for me. Is okay, what can I do from a housing advocacy standpoint? To help build more housing, more affordable housing, more humane housing, and so forth. So, we the Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana, did an exhibit a couple of years ago. We hosted that. First we took our whole firm and toured the exhibit, and then we were able to host it at the Murphy Arts Center where our office is. Just small things like that. With the AIA, I'm tracking kind of housing related legislation. I don't have some other kinds of experience, but in the stuff where I do have experience, I feel like that's some place where maybe I might be able to contribute.
I know that Jason Shelley does a lot of lobbying for architecture. Do you and him collaborate often?
Yeah, so what Jason is incredible in that he's got a lobbying background, and that's frankly great for the architectural community. He does a really good job of identifying legislation that could affect our industry and positioning architect members of the AIA to be well equipped to participate in those discussions. So for right now, there's a bill going through this legislature that's got some housing related aspects. Well, Jason sent it out to several people, and so we're looking closely at that legislation now.
Gotcha. Let's talk a little bit about culture, which I'm particularly interested in because, granted, my business isn't an architecture firm, but it is a small business, and
Mhm.
culture relates in many different ways. In running a small design studio, of course, it comes with the challenge of building a strong internal culture. At Blackline, you've fostered an environment where doing good for the community is as important as doing good work, and where team members' unique talents are recognized and nurtured. The studio's ethos suggests a balance between creative design ambition and growth minded supportive, growth minded workplace. What philosophies have guided you in shaping Blackline's office culture and values? And in what ways do you encourage collaboration, innovation, or work life balance among your team?
Mhm. Um, I would say that um, culture is an ongoing challenge. It's an ongoing discussion in any business, because it's not something that you can impose as a firm leader. As the culture, you're part of it, but you're not all of it, right? And so, um, being aware that, um, how you enter the office every day can have a part of that, a role in the culture, but encouraging other folks to participate in culture as well. Um, we're not at Blackline. We're not. I sometimes say we're not a very rah-rah office. We're not doing necessarily team building stuff. Our culture is much more kind of organic than structured, and that can sometimes that feels more honest to me.
Sure.
It means it's more consistent with how I am, and I think it's more consistent with kind of the people that are drawn to working for us. But it's again something that we're continuing to work on.
Gotcha. I like that answer a lot better than pizza parties. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love pizza, but
Sure.
but but it doesn't smooth over if somebody's frustrated with something, or if a coworker just left, or there's things that the firm culture can be very dependent on the mix of personalities that are in the firm at any given time,
Sure.
and how those personalities kind of mesh or how they don't, and so that's um I would say over our 25 years, there's been times where our culture's been great and tight and really working well, and other times where it's kind of stretched and not working as well. um but it's not only me that can address that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I come from I worked in a corporate culture. I'm not going to mention names. Where there was a particular time when morale was low for good reason, and their solution to that was pizza parties and pitch-ins, and they happened probably once a month at that point, and I everybody made fun of it because it didn't really help. So, that being said, what single piece of advice would you give other small firm leaders about creating a firm culture that attracts and retains passionate design talent?
um just be the best person you can. Recognize that everybody's coming from a different place.
Be present.
Trying to absolutely be present. One of my best bosses that I had as an architect, um, thinking back on him, one of the things he did very well was that was about a 25-person firm, and every afternoon he would make it around the office, check in with everybody.
Awesome.
It's that kind of management by walking around philosophy It's a little bit different now with work from home and computers and, folks wearing headphones and stuff, but it's, that I think I just kind of absorbed that and took that on as something to again, kind of relating to parenting. It's, it doesn't have to be a long or complex interaction, but just a brief minute of, hey, you doing okay? What are you working on? You having any troubles? Those sorts of just kind of brief interactions, I think, are what I try and do, hopefully, to kind of build that.
I think that's a great piece of advice, and I said be present because it loops back into your previous
Mhm.
advice about mentorship, and being a parent.
Yeah.
Um, cool. With a portfolio spanning residential, commercial, institutional, and more, you've developed a reputation for technical proficiency and time-tested knowledge of construction over the years. Colleagues have noted your strength in marrying ambitious design ideas with realistic building methods and budgets. In real-world practice, especially with adaptive reuse, architects must negotiate strict code requirements, old structural constraints, and client budgets without sacrificing vision. How do you approach the pragmatics of the craft of building when you design? And can you share how you turn real world constraints into opportunities or creativity in your projects?
Yeah. So, when we're doing a renovation or adaptive reuse project, one of the things, the building is going to steer you to the right answer.
Okay.
You just have to be open to getting to that. So, for example, if you were going to take an old school, um, schools work very well getting converted to housing because a classroom is about the size of an apartment unit, and there's usually lots of windows, and those sorts of things. It's when you try to make, if you're working with a historic building or reuse, when you're trying to twist that building into some other use or function that it doesn't really want to get to, that's when it's uncomfortable. That's when it's harder. I think, there's always kind of code challenges because new code is different. Some some buildings you work on, building code didn't exist when that building was built. So you've got to you've got to find a way to do that. We've got great relationship with, Ed Rensink, who's a code consultant. RTM is the name of his company. We work with them a lot, and he helps us basically fine tune a code approach to allow a building to be reused or converted into new use and so forth. So that's one key that we do. I think with you talk about kind of the craft of building. One thing that I've found is that the more the better you know the code, the better you understand the requirements of, systems and structures that can make your design better. It doesn't those items don't have to be an impediment to your design if you have an understanding of how they work, because as you design, you're going to automatically kind of incorporate those elements in the design rather than doing as a design, it's perfect, and oh, now it's going to get crushed by all of these things that are going to mess it up. Well, if you understand all that stuff, your design's going to be better because it already incorporates a lot of those things.
You say the building will tell you, the building will guide you.
Mhm.
Is there a specific scenario you can share where the building guided you to a better design solution?
Yeah. So, for example, when you've got a historic building, say you've got a main street and buildings side by side by side. Well, you've got windows in the front and in the back, and not in the sidewalls, right? So that then dictates you've got a long narrow space. Well, how many apartments can you do in that space? You can do 4 really narrow ones or 2 wider ones and so forth, just based upon the window quantity you have or where the existing stairs are, or, those sorts of things. So, that is, um, part of it is recognizing those kind of limitations quickly and then presenting those to the owner and saying, you realize you can only probably do this because you only have windows on the front and back. Oh, okay. But if you can kind of intercede early enough to kind of sometimes readjust the goals of the project to something more realistic that is more consistent with what the building already is.
Gotcha.
That's better.
Gotcha. Well, after graduating Ball State in 1990, you spent the first chunk of your career at three different architecture firms in Louisville, Kentucky, before returning to Indiana in '98. What early, pardon me, that early period in Kentucky, a different state and design community, must have offered some formative experiences and lessons. Uh, then you came back home and not long after that launched your own firm. So looking back, how did your time in Louisville shape you as a young architect? And are there specific projects or mentors from those years that influenced your approach once you started your own practice in Indy?
Hmm. Um, yeah, so graduated from Ball State. My wife and I decided, okay, let's try and stay within a 2-hour radius of Indianapolis, just because we had, family here and so forth. So, I heard about a firm in Louisville that was hiring, went and interviewed for that firm. Figured since I was down there, I'd interviewed a couple other firms while I was there. Um, got a job at a firm at the time was called Hawkins Argabright Associates. So those two guys, Joe Argabright and Mark Hawkins, were very different as individuals, but both great mentors to me. And the kind of architect that I would eventually become. The three firms that I worked at, we worked on anything from single family homes to I did a bookstore. I did projects working with the Corps of Engineers. I did projects at Fort Knox and Fort Campbell. I did housing projects. I worked on the jail, the downtown jail in Louisville, Kentucky, Metro Corrections. So I got exposed to a huge range of project types. And with those project types, you then get experience on different kinds of construction. So single family wood frame construction, Corps of Engineers using steel. This jail project was a cast in place structure. So I got great early experiences and was able to spend time on job sites and see the different trades and the work involved to build a building. And that's been infinitely helpful over my time as an architect, is just having an understanding of the sequence of the trades, having an understanding of what different kinds of structures, the limitations of those different kinds of structures, and what it takes to build those and so forth. So, when we started the firm, yeah, we were doing houses, but when we got the opportunity to do these kind of mixed use, bigger urban infill kinds of projects, well, yeah, we knew how to do cast in place concrete structures. We knew our engineers could do that. We understood, that process. And so that made it an easier transition to scale up our work, just because of the background that we had. And again, Louisville, I could have gotten those kind of experiences anywhere. Louisville was a great place for us. It was like you said, it was a different state, it was a different community. That it was very collegial in terms of the architectural community there. I've got a lot of friends there. I I I still get to see them at like AIA conventions and
Yeah.
so forth. Um, and it's pretty nice to just pick up where we left off,
But
conversations and so forth. So that was a great experience for me. Family reasons brought us back to central Indiana, and that's been a good thing too. But
what, if any, perspectives did you gain from working in Louisville, Kentucky, a different region entirely, that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise if you just stayed in Indy the whole time?
well, that Louisville helped me kind of appreciate the history. Some of my projects early on in Louisville were looking at historic structures, and w- like my first year down there, I got to spend time measuring and drawing a building that had con- Union and Confederate soldiers had been treated there for injuries in this building
Wow.
called the Kennett Tavern, and just being able to be in a historic structure and appreciate the sense of history, but also recognize that, okay, we can adapt it. We can take this building and turn it into something. So that's probably the root of part of my kind of interest or desire in historic buildings is those early experiences that I had there.
Finding a way to
And
keep 'em
and
alive.
Yeah, and a little bit, Kentucky's got a little bit of a head start on Indiana in terms of its history, right? It was settled earlier than Indiana was, and that just again kind of clicked with me.
Gotcha. I think being on the Ohio River had a lot to do with that.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Cayuga, Indiana used to be the first capital, right? I believe so.
Corden.
Corden, I'm
Yep,
sorry.
yep,
Corden, it's also on the so that makes sense.
yep.
Your influence extends beyond just designing buildings, though. You've also helped create spaces for community and culture. For example, in the 2012 Super Bowl festivities, you hosted an exhibit of celebrating Indianapolis's architectural heritage. I think you mentioned
Mhm,
this in an earlier answer that you gave, setting that up in your studio at the Fountain Square office, I believe.
mhm.
Yep. Blackline also, as a firm, invests in the community by donating to local nonprofits and supporting arts collectives like Pattern Magazine. This curatorial and community minded streak suggests that you see architecture as intertwined with civic life and culture. Why do you feel it's so important for an architecture firm to engage in things like hosting exhibits, supporting local arts, or others civic initiatives?
Sure. Um, Again, it's those are the communities where we know people. We're located in Fountain Square. We're in the Murphy Arts Center. So right around the corner is a painter, Mike Graves. He's amazing painter. So for us, we were able to kind of participate in the artistic nature of the Murphy Art Center. Occasionally, we don't do it. We're not there every month, but occasionally we've hosted exhibits and so forth, and again seems like an appropriate or appropriate role for us to fulfill is. Because it's hopefully consistent with what we do, it's consistent with where we're located, it's providing the space to show art and so forth. So those are all kind of pieces that just kind of fit together to explain why we do that. So, um, we try and give folks the opportunity to participate in outside activities, and we encourage folks to do that. And that's just we think that's our obligation, frankly, as professionals, to somehow kind of be a good corporate citizen, somehow participate in things. So this year we're hoping to, right now, Habitat of Greater Indianapolis is a client of ours. We're hoping to get some volunteer days organized that we can work with Habitat on some projects here yet this year. So that's something that's on the horizon for us.
I'm sensing a pattern here in multiple answers that you've given. It seems like if you are able to do something good, you should do something good. It's not
That
just ignore your ability to do so.
that's yeah, again, I'm not it's like I say, I'm not the guy to organize the bake sale. If you
Sure.
need me to show up and be at the bake sale and sell cookies, absolutely, I'll do that. But if I'm gonna donate more time than that, I want it to be something that leverages our knowledge or our skill set or our other kinds of passions towards hopefully a even bigger good. So,
Sure.
and so that's whether it's art displays at the Murphy or volunteering or doing working with the AIA, reviewing legislation and so forth. That's all kind of what I think we have to do
Yeah.
as professionals.
Yeah, not just anybody can do it. That makes sense. Yeah. How have these efforts, essentially stepping beyond daily client work to nurture the community culture, how they impacted your team and your sense of fulfillment as an architect?
I think when we've done whether it's a staff, volunteer event or whatever, I think our staff benefits from that. Being outside the office but working together on something is a good thing, because it takes us out of our roles, our normal day-to-day roles, into a different context and a different setting to work towards something that's bigger than both of us, that sort of thing. So I think um, yeah, that's something we really enjoyed.
What would you say to other architects about the value of being an active citizen in addition to being a designer?
Um, I would say find find the opportunities that you're interested in and where you can feel like you can make a difference. And not everybody's, going to have the same kind of interests or backgrounds. So for us, it's, I'm not going to necessarily go out and advocate for healthcare architecture because I don't understand that world. I don't understand the process. I don't understand how that works, but I kind of know how housing works. I've worked for single family builders. We've worked for multifamily developers. We've worked for not-for-profits that are all trying to do housing in different types and different ways. And I've been blessed to have a pretty good cross section of experience across those. So if there's something that I can do or say or role that I can take or a document that I can review or whatever it is, that's just, I feel like I got to do it.
Gotcha. In volunteering your time to do these things, or helping Jason with legislation and just all the stuff that you volunteer your time to be part of something bigger than yourself, have any of these made you a better architect? Not just a better person, but a better architect, like actually changed you technically into a better architect?
Um, I think, we talked a little bit about, I'm chair of this design review committee, for the town of Danville where I live. That's made me a better architect in terms of understanding, being able to review an ordinance, understand what the ordinance may be trying to achieve with its design criteria, and being able to tailor our response that's more closely fit to the ordinance or made us more responsive to how those things work. I think it's small things like that. It's not I did this one thing, now I'm a great architect. It's a building process, and so every small thing makes a positive. I see it as a positive impact.
Gotcha. Thanks. Sorry for putting you on the spot with that bonus question, but thank you for taking the time to answer it. This has been a great conversation, and that is all the questions that I have. Thank you very much for joining us. I
Absolutely.
really appreciate it, and I'm sure other people will love to hear what you have to say.
Super. Thanks.